Hey everyone, thanks for dropping by. And if you're new, I'm your host, Jonah. Welcome to the Blue Collar Enlightenment Show, where we learn new things every episode through conversations with guests from all around the globe. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can keep up with the journey. Enjoy the episode. Welcome, Mary Beth O'Connor. Thank you for taking the time and talking with me. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty well. We had a couple of tech glitches, but we're good now, and I appreciate being on the show.
Oh, yeah, the frustration of technology can definitely... There's been times I've been wanting to throw this computer through the window. Tell you what. But we brought you on to talk to you today about a few different subjects, and I'd like to just start off with you telling the audience just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I say the short version of my story is that child abuse led to childhood addiction, right? Which is really a common path. So my mother was unmarried in 1961, which was a really big deal. And when she had me, I didn't go home with her. I was left in a nunnery for 6 months. And then I moved in with her, and she got married at that time. And she was really not connected, to me. She didn't pay attention, wasn't interested. But things got a lot worse when I was 9, and she married my stepfather. And he was very, very violent with her. One time I remember watching her when I was around 11, when he was choking her on the porch. It was a high stress environment. And then he was also violent with me, physically violent, sexually violent. So all of that sort of, you never knew what was going to happen when you walked in the house. It was a lot of stress on me as a child. And so when I found my first drug, which was when I was 12, and it was alcohol, Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine, which I know a lot of people are familiar with. And that made me feel so much better. I felt like a weight was taken off my shoulder, like I could breathe, and I was giggling with my girlfriend, and that really caught my attention. Like, this is a good thing. I want more. And so I used a lot of alcohol fast, and I escalated weed, pills, a lot of acid my sophomore year. And at 16, I found what became my drug of choice, which was methamphetamine. And I was shooting up within 6 months at 17 years old, and in full bore addiction before I even graduated high school. So it was a tough start.
That's deep to start with. And so, overcoming addiction is definitely a tough task at hand. And so what are some of the strategies, and having such a dark past, how was it overcoming that situation?
Yeah, so I didn't even go and try to get sober until I was 32. So it was a really lengthy haul. I was using for 20 years, and most of that was meth. And so by 32, I was in a really bad place, as you could imagine. My body was showing signs of it. Meth's a very toxic drug. I was really exhausted, emotionally debilitated, in despair. My partner's ready to leave. And, so finally I was like, well, what if I go to rehab? And so one of the things I like to emphasize is it's not like I walked in the doors 100% committed to sobriety. Most people don't, right? You don't even really know what it means. I remember telling my girlfriend, I don't know what stop means. Like, it was beyond my imagination. But I did this, I did go in, I took it seriously. Some of what they taught me wasn't a good fit. I'm not really a faith-based, 12-step person, but I read all of the 12-step books, and I pulled the ideas I could use. And in rehab, I was actively participating. And so I was really trying to keep my mind and my ears open for like all the ideas I could find that would be good tools or techniques. Even listening to people talk in meetings, like in private conversations, what tool did they use? What skill, what technique, what strategy did they use that I might be able to apply myself? And so part of it was just even though everything I was offered wasn't a great fit, it was being open to all the ideas around me so I could find the ones that would work. And that was one of the things that really helped me. And I think another one was really, I was relatively patient. I wasn't expecting my life to magically improve, in 6 months. Maybe I wished it, but I didn't expect it. And so part of it was really thinking about, what are the things I can work on first? Because I had broken like my whole life and you can't fix it all at once. And what are my priorities? What's my first plan? What are my first goals? And then carrying them out, and then sort of being patient about each step, understanding that it's going to be incremental improvement rather than sort of a race, a race to sobriety, or a race to make up for lost time, which is one of the things you feel when you get sober.
Right. And going through the trial and error of all the different ways you could go about it, how tough was it getting through and making sure that you did not relapse back into the old life?
Well, I used 3 times in my first 5 months, and that was actually, of course, much better, right? That was a vast improvement. And I mean, there are some people that have perfect abstinence from day one, but most people don't. And so part of it's that you really don't have the skills yet to be able to maintain that abstinence. You sort of need practice and you need an understanding of it. And part of it's just that it's such a habit, to go back to it, that I was actually proud. As I say, if I would have been able to use 3 times in 5 months on a regular basis, I wouldn't have been in rehab, right? Like that was a big improvement, but it wasn't perfect. And when I talk to friends and family, I know when they can get really afraid if someone doesn't have perfect abstinence from day one, but I try to reassure them that that's often the pattern, but over time, people tend to build longer periods of sobriety or have their relapses be shorter. And so part of it is not getting overly frustrated with the lack of perfection, but instead focusing on how much you've improved, what you've learned, how you can apply what you've learned this next time out.
So you talk how you did it a little bit different than the traditional way. Mm-hmm. And can you kind of explain that in layman's terms, please?
Sure. So, so like 12 steps, AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, those are all 12-step programs, all the Anonymouses. And they're peer support, but they have a certain, philosophy, like that you have to believe in a higher power and turn over your will in your life and agree you're powerless. But there are other approaches. And so I got sober in 93, 94. I'm actually going to have 30 years in January. So I'm coming up on a big soberversary, as we say. But there were other options even then, and they're more focused on self-empowerment. And so I found the Women for Sobriety, which still exists. I found Rational Recovery, which today is mostly Smart Recovery. I found SOS, which today is mostly LifeRing, Secular Recovery. And some of those core ideas are really about that I'm really the person in charge of my own recovery, right? That it's not that I need to do it alone. But I'm the decision maker. What's going to work for me? What are the options for me? And also that I'm different from you. And so my plan and your plan probably won't be the same. And so it's really about using the group as sort of a source of ideas and support. And, you share congratulations when things go well, you commiserate and offer love and friendship when things don't go well. So it's just a little bit different way of looking at it. But, today there's a lot of choices and people mix and match like I did. So I didn't pick one program. I mixed them up in a way that worked for me. And today we would call that a hybrid or a patchwork plan. So there's a lot of different ways to approach it. And it's really about what fits with your sort of worldview, but also what do you think is going to work for you? You probably know what will and won't work for you, at least mostly.
Yeah, I'm sure having that community behind you is a powerful thing, because we as humans kind of we can pretty well consider us tribe type people. And we got to have the correct mentality around us, or it definitely affects our own attitude and our own mental stability at times.
Well, that's right. And in early recovery, it can be really important to see other people who have succeeded, right? Because like I said, when I walked in, I couldn't really imagine sober. But then when you meet people and they have, a similar history to you, they've used drugs, at the severe level that you've used drugs for a long time. They've broken their life the way you have, and yet they're sober and they have like a year or two and they look healthy and they have a job and maybe they're paying off their debts and they're getting visitation with their kids, and it's a source of they're a model for you that this is possible for you. If they are like you and they did it, then maybe you can do it too if you put in the work. And so it is a support, but it's also a reassurance and an example of how to accomplish it.
And going through that process, what were the strategies that you found yourself worked for you?
For me, it was really important to sort of look at my bigger picture. I mean, for one thing, I had PTSD and I didn't know it, right? And I had severe anxiety. So I had to attack it from both sides. I had to work on my substance use issue, but I also had to work on my mental health. And that also is very common, a very high percentage. It's 55 to 75%, depending on the study, of people with a substance use disorder have another mental health issue too. And so one of the things I did do from the beginning was I got a therapist who had expertise in trauma and addiction, and I worked with her from the beginning. And that was really helpful to me to tackle both sides of the coin. The other thing was I think I was pretty good about realizing that I couldn't fix my whole life at once because I had destroyed almost everything. And so I really sat down literally with a piece of paper and I wrote down all the things I could think of that I had to work on. And then I picked like the top 5. And I just said, that's all I can work on I cannot work on this whole list. The list is too long. And so I focused on like my sobriety, my trauma recovery, getting back to work because I had really a horrible, embarrassing resume despite a Berkeley degree, working on my relationship with my partner, which was on its last legs and, ready to go away, and trying to get myself a little bit more stable. So I was pretty good about recognizing that I had to prioritize and then setting the plans and working on a plan in each area, step by step, moving forward. What's my first goal? Once I achieve that, what's my second goal? What's my plan? How do I get ready to keep moving forward? And being persistent and patient.
And can you kind of walk us through that moment that you had to step into rehab?
Yeah. I mean, I was 32 and I couldn't hold a job, right? Because I couldn't get there. I couldn't show up for work, or if I went there, I'd leave in the middle of the day. I was really having a lot of physical problems. I was starting to feel it. I mean, I just felt ill. I looked gray, I had, scars and abscesses on me because my body couldn't fight anything off anymore. But mostly I was just so in such despair. I was so miserable. And there's just that knowledge that it's not going to get better. Like, this is the way it's been for a long time and this isn't going to get better. But I felt trapped. And so it's hard. It's hard when you're in the middle of it to make the choice to move forward, because it's hard to have any confidence that can happen. So it's a tough dynamic. But one of the reasons I like to talk is because, I had a pretty significant child abuse history. I had sexual assaults outside the home. I had a violent boyfriend, a long-term substance use disorder, and yet I not only got sober, but I built a happy life. And so, I'm not, I don't think I'm all that special. It makes me want to reassure others that no matter where they are today, no matter how bad it is, there's a path out.
No, but this story is definitely a special one, because when I heard it, and it's amazing. And we're going to get to the future. We're just kind of diving in the past, and because it's relevant to what we're going to be talking about. And so when you were going through rehab, what was kind of the failure rate to successful rate did you see?
Well, there's a lot of data about these things. And I always like to emphasize that when you see things like only 5% succeed or 10%, when you see those numbers, what they mean is in that effort, right? That effort. But the data shows that in the bigger picture, in the long run, 75% of the people with a substance use disorder will eventually recover. So it's about 75% in the long run. It's just that for each attempt, the percentage is low. Like I used 3 times in my first 5 months. Did I fail, succeed? I don't really look at it that way. I look at it as I was building up my skills. I was building up my belief that it was possible, building up my commitment, and until I was able to do it. And so it depends on how you look at it. But it is true that on each effort, the odds aren't great. But in the bigger picture, most people do eventually recover.
Right. And there's been some very successful people that have been through certain times in their life where they're down. I mean, we all go through it. It just depends on the situation. And, I'm sure there's a lot of factors that play into it, but, everybody's different.
Yeah, and there's a really strong interplay between mental health and trauma and substance use disorder, and also it's the other side. About 25% of the people that have mental health disorders also have a substance use disorder. I mean, substance use disorder is a mental health disorder. It's a psychiatric condition. It's a brain disorder, but there's a real strong interplay, and part of the thing that's changed in my 29 and 3/4 years of sobriety is that now we recognize that it's better to tackle the whole picture from the beginning. If somebody's struggling with their sobriety, it's really difficult to get their mental health under control. And if your mental health is under some control, it's hard to stay sober. And so there's a real strong interplay between those two. And a lot of people have both, which is called dual diagnosis or co-occurring disorder. And so one of the tools for success can be addressing any other mental health condition that you have at the time that you start your recovery for your drug use.
So okay, so I'm pretty ignorant on this subject. So I've always heard the term addictive personality. So what would that be categorized?
Well, that's sort of an older term. The only personality trait that they've found so far that people who develop a substance use disorder have is actually impulsivity. So there's not really a strong, specific personality. And the reality is that people with all kinds of different personalities and all kinds of different backgrounds develop a substance use disorder, but people who are more impulsive have a higher risk of it. But the other side of it is that when you get sober, part of that addictive personality idea is that when you get sober, if you don't build a strong foundation, you might turn to something else to sort of to meet the same emotional needs. So if you're not addressing what caused you to develop the substance use disorder, but you stop drinking or you stop using, then you might go and start gambling or having an eating disorder or doing some other risky behavior. But it's not necessarily that it's your personality. It's more that there's pain underneath it that hasn't been addressed. And if you don't address what's underneath, you're going to act out in some other way, or you have a high risk of doing that.
It's interesting you say that because, I've known a lot of people in my past that have been addicted to different drugs and different things, and that they've gotten better. It has changed to other things. And a buddy told me, I was actually talking to somebody last night about this. But the willpower that you have behind everything is a strong point to it. But it's the only reason you do it is to make yourself feel good. And if you can escape the pain, that's where it's at. And so being able to find what makes us feel good with something that doesn't hurt us is kind of in today's age, I mean, it's everywhere. People will get, addicted to video games
Right.
because that makes it feel good. I had a friend, and I was talking about this had come up. Smelling salts. That's a big thing in weightlifting, and people do it just to get that jolt, like, a quick shot of coffee. And I had a buddy that, I had a can of it, or a little thing of it, just to have it, because I was lifting weights and I was using it but I don't use it anymore. But he got addicted to it just off of one sniff because it made him feel that good. And so that kind of opened my eyes to things, and that's what made me not want to do it anymore, is because I seen somebody get addicted to it, and I was like, I don't want nothing to do with it. And I think that helped me growing up, because I'm kind of that same trait, because I'm a smoker. I've been smoking cigarettes for a long time, and it's been a very, very hard thing to kick is tobacco. That's got a strong hold. And it just makes me scared to want to just try anything else.
Well, I will say that part of what you're talking about is why it's important to build community when you get sober, because if you don't have anything to replace the time and energy that you spent in your addiction, you're going to be at a loss and pick something else up. But one of the focuses today is, what are you going to do instead? Are you going to go to meetings? Are you going to do some activity, develop new friends, reignite other friendships? Are you going to do therapy? Are you going to pick up a new positive hobby? Do you want to join the bowling team? Something we do need to replace to fill our time with positive experiences, healthier experiences, or we're even more likely to fall back into that numbing behavior of, using video games or gambling or something else. And so it is important to have that whole picture. And that is part of what peer support meetings can do, is you meet other sober people and they'll invite you to coffee, or they'll invite you, to go out somewhere, and that can build a community, but it can also keep you busy. In the beginning, just being busy is important. To not have too much time on your hands is actually a sober technique,
I'm not gonna lie, I am addicted to this podcast. I love this. I love doing it. I get to meet so many different people, such amazing people doing crazy things, and the conversations that I get to have with them, you never know what is going to be said at all. And so, it makes me feel good. And especially to be able to spread knowledge and, advocacy, which is something else that you do as well. I like to do that, because that's an important thing about, the community that we find ourselves in. The world is, making sure we have each other's back. I mean,
that's true. Although the current definition of addiction is negative consequences. Are you having are you doing your podcast despite many negative consequences? If it's just that you love it, that's just a joy. You don't have to, that's not an addiction. That's just a joy in your life.
It brings me less sleep. Let's put it that way. No, I certainly enjoy doing this podcast for sure. But could you talk a little bit about your advocacy groups that you're a part of?
Sure. So I'm on the board for LifeRing Secular Recovery, which is a peer support group, and we focus on what we call the 3 S's. So it's sobriety, secularity, and self-empowerment. And so for LifeRing, sobriety actually includes taking medication, and I always emphasize as prescribed. So sometimes people take medication to help with alcohol use disorder or opiate use disorder, and for us that counts as sober. And then for secularity, there's no religion in meetings, but a lot of our members have personal, spiritual, or religious beliefs, and we don't have any opinion about that. We just don't. Our recovery is focused more on self-empowerment, on building up the strength of the self. And then it's that third S is self-empowerment. So it's about as I said, my plan and your plan might be different. It's what will work for you might not work for me, but that we can still come together and help each other and give each other support and share ideas, which we consider suggestions, not you have to do this, but rather here's what worked for me. Let me tell you about it so you can consider it. And LifeRing's available online, but also it is available face-to-face meetings in some areas around the country. I think we're back to around 80 meetings face to face. Before COVID, we had 200, but we're building back up. But it's online, and that's one of them. And then I'm on the board for She Recovers Foundation. And She Recovers isn't just for substance recovery. It's for recovery from trauma, mental health, other disorders like video or gambling, overworking. It's sort of all together because most of the women that get sober have one or more of those other areas to work on. And so in She Recovers, you can talk about the whole thing. You don't have to just talk about your substance use. You can talk about your recovery from your trauma or your recovery from your codependency or recovery from your overworking or whatever it might be. And we can talk about it all in one place rather than having to sort of segregate it out.
And coming out of, it was actually during your recovery, you started going to school, and it actually led somewhere.
Somewhere unusual, yeah.
Amazing. And this is one of the reasons that caught my eye with your story is that the boundaries are limitless when you're able to control.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, so I had graduated from college before I got sober, but when I got sober at 6 years, I went to law school. I went to Berkeley Law, and so that was a real joy to be able to do that. And I worked at a big law firm when I graduated, and then I did big class actions for the federal government. And in 2014, I was appointed a federal judge, a federal administrative law judge, and then I emphasize early retirement in 2020. So that was, an interesting trajectory to go from shooting meth to becoming a judge. It's why I call my book From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, to sort of show, from junkie to judge that really in recovery, the future can be almost anything. It's sort of just a couple words to show that transition. But yeah, look, I'm proud of it. It was an accomplishment, but it was also my job, right? The best part of recovery is like the lack of chaos, the lack of obsession, being a good wife and a good aunt, and like you say, being of service, and just not living in that insanity. I mean, that's the true joy. But I am proud I was able to become a federal judge, and that was a moment of real accomplishment in my recovery.
Right. And the pride of self-accomplishment, not only that being a part of the service to the community on a federal level must have been, for yourself, a round of applause. And, it goes to show you that when you put your mind to it and you can control your willpower, it's just boundless. I mean, you could go anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, part of it for me, when I sort of took ownership of my recovery, what it actually taught me was how to handle the rest of my life, right? Because it was sort of the same process for everything, thinking about what are my priorities, what's my initial goal, what's my plan, implementing it, and then updating it. And it's just amazing what can happen. I mean, I was appointed a federal judge when I had 20 years sober. It's not like I went into rehab and thought, one day I'll be a judge. I mean, it wasn't on my radar, right? But it was always about like, what's my right next step? What's my right next job? And just moving forward incrementally. And it's amazing what can happen when you do that over 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. It's you can really accomplish great things just by taking that shorter term focus will get you really far over time.
I'm sure that you had to have that plan even with the chaos of, law in itself. You went from one chaos and substituted to another chaos.
Oh, there is some truth to that. That's true. There is some truth to that. Yes.
So what type of cases did you take care of while you were a federal judge?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different kind of judges. And for the federal government, when you're an administrative law judge, you work for a specific agency. And I worked for the Social Security Administration. So I heard cases that involved Social Security cases. When I was a litigator, I litigated mostly business cases and class actions. But as a judge, that's what I focused on.
I bet you've heard some of the most atrocious cases ever.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of people with histories like mine, right? A lot of people that were struggling with substances or were struggling with their mental health. And sometimes I could see it was old. It was from, trauma that they had never really recovered from. And so there were a lot of times where I could really, where I really recognized myself in some of the people that appeared before me.
Yeah, and I could see it's going to be kind of I don't want to say downward spiral, because people after COVID, they say, well, I'm just paraphrasing. I'm saying what I've learned out there in the world, that communication is on a downward spiral because we can't even communicate face to face anymore. Everything has to be through a text. And so, I mean, just trying to beat out what my son wants to do during the day, a teenager, is a chore. So I can feel for these therapists that are trying to, talk to people, and we're having a breakdown in communication because we don't talk to people anymore, especially after the period of COVID where you couldn't. I mean, it was all FaceTime.
Yeah, and we were headed there before. I mean, I know, even before COVID, if your phone rings and somebody didn't text you and say they were going to call, it's like, what's wrong? Why is my phone ringing? Right? I mean, it's a shock. It's either a spam call or a sales call, or somebody died. I mean, that's like the only options when the phone rings, right? But you're right. COVID was isolating, and for example, the alcohol rate use rate went up during COVID. Women in particular have a noticeably higher alcohol use disorder rate because of the isolation. And there was also a lot of pressure on families because kids were home and people were trying to work and all of that. So it was definitely a stressor time. And you're right that we're not as used to that face-to-face communication as we used to be. I mean, kids can practically be in the same room and they're texting each other rather than talking to each other sometimes.
Is that not because they don't want to? They don't want people overhearing their conversation.
That's true. There is a privacy side.
It's and they don't want to look you in the eye when it. I mean, we could go down a whole just on that topic, but we won't get too sidetracked. But I mean, being able to get to the bottom of things, because not only are I mean, we could just use the example of a woman that got abused and raped by a man. What happened in that man's life that he thought it was okay to do that? I mean, all around in the circle, we got to figure out what the whole problem is on each side, and we just throw people in jail without getting to the bottom of the situation.
Yeah. And that's really true for substance use disorder too, right? I mean, today there are 500,000 people in jail just for drug possession. I mean, not sales, not crimes related to drug, just for possession. And it's really odd to me because on one hand, our own government categorizes addiction, which, we now call substance use disorder, categorizes it as a disease. And yet, if you're caught with drugs, you get thrown in jail, even though a lot of those people do have a medical condition. But the other problem is that we spend a lot of money on throwing people in jail. We could treat 3 to 4 people for the same amount of money as we jail one person. And so it's not even a good use of our resources. We'd be better, as you say, spending the money to figure out what's really going on underneath and helping them repair that. but we don't do it that way.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just the effects of the substance being used that turns that person into a monster, because I've seen some of the most gentle people that when they get on, a substance, that they just turn into the biggest monster I've ever seen.
I mean, especially alcohol in particular can really increase people's anger levels and, and frustration levels. We think of it as sort of a something that's relaxing, but alcohol actually is only relaxing in very small amounts. After that, it turns up, it amps things up and has a negative impact on a lot of people. You're right. And often it's that they don't know how to handle their anger. It's usually also coming from somewhere that they don't know how to express it in an appropriate way sober. And it's sort of shoved down. And then when the chemicals in their body sort of freeze them up and they explode. And that's not good for them. And it's not good for the people around them.
Which takes us back to, the communication breakdown of the human race, of being able to talk to people, I don't even know how you could be lonely in today's age. You could FaceTime somebody and see somebody. I mean, right now I'm literally interviewing you from a couple states away. So loneliness should be the farthest feeling we should feel anymore. Because I can contact people from Africa and have a full out conversation with them all the way over there. The UK, I mean, different countries.
But loneliness is increasing. I saw a study in the last month talking about how loneliness is really increasing and what a negative impact it has on mental health and even your body. I mean, your immune system doesn't work as well when you're lonely and feeling isolated. I mean, you're right, there are solutions, but people get into that box and it's hard for them to find their way out. I see it in some members of my family. They get isolated and it's hard to ask for help. Sometimes I'll text and I don't get a response, and I know that it's not because they're busy with other people. It's because they're feeling so, sort of debilitated from being isolated and alone. It can have a ripple effect in so many different ways.
Yeah. I read a study they did that, women are more likely to be single into their 30s because men are running away from the thought of having a relationship. And I'm sure there's many reasons why, and I ain't even going to get into them. I didn't want to read too far. I read the headline and like the first couple paragraphs, and I was like, all right, I got better things to
Well, I mean, I think it can be hard from both sides, right? To really connect and communicate. And let's be honest, relationships are work, right? I mean, it takes, especially in the beginning, to be able to hear each other and, develop that trust and develop an understanding of each other. It's hard work, relationships in the early stages.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're telling me I've been married close to 8 years now. And, I don't miss dating one bit.
Exactly. I do not want to do that ever again. I told my husband, if he dies, that I'm done. I'm not doing it again.
Yeah, I ain't even going to worry about it no more. There ain't going to be no more of it. No, but back to your story, and we could go down that rabbit hole and be here for 2 hours talking about the different issues of that. But so what is there any kind of new treatments out, any kind of new research going around that you could share with us?
Well, I will say, I mean, in my years of sobriety, a lot has changed. A lot of the understanding has changed. And in the last 10 years, especially, there is a lot more money going to research about addiction and recovery. But some of the new techniques that are really helpful is we now have medication assisted treatment for alcohol use disorder and for opiates. And so there are medications that have very, very high success rates of keeping, they reduce the cravings and they can help people stay sober longer, or at least significantly reduce their intake. There are drugs for opiate use disorder that reduce the risk of dying from an overdose by over 50% if they're taken. There's nothing yet for stimulants, although there is research going on. So the medication is a big step forward. It's a big plus. The other thing is that they've learned a lot of things about, for example, doing the trauma work and the substance work together. They didn't do that when I got sober. They do that now. There's much more. There are more doctors and therapists that are being treated specifically in addiction. There's not enough, but there are more that actually have training in substance use disorder, and that's been helpful for a lot of people. There's also a recognition that not everybody needs to go inpatient for treatment. It really depends on how severe your substance use is. So when I got sober, they said there was this sort of invisible line that you crossed, and one day you went from drug abuser to drug addict. But now we don't talk about it that way. Now it's viewed as on a spectrum of mild, moderate, or severe. Just like depression can be mild, moderate, or severe, or anxiety. And so where you fall on that mild, moderate, or severe spectrum can be important in deciding what treatment you need. But also we now know, don't wait to have some horrible bottom. Early intervention is encouraged. If people intervene earlier, they're going to be better off, better odds of success, less destruction to their life, less risk of dying or having sort of irreversible medical conditions. So those are some of the changes that I've seen in my 30 years of sobriety.
Yeah, and I bet that more technology comes out and the more we're understanding of it, the better it's going to get. And I would hope there'd be more emphasis on the mental side than anything, because PTSD is a big leading cause of substance abuse as it is, whether it be from these homeless veterans that are on the street that are addicted to, even to, the little girl, like yourself that grew up 12 years old that's addicted on the streets as well. And I feel like we are failing as a community and a world to buckle down on these types of issues, and how, I don't want to go on a rant, but how there's leading forces out there that push these types of addictive substances upon us just for a dollar bill.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely happened with, the opioid expansion that happened in the 90s and the early 2000s. And the other reality is that sometimes I don't think Americans appreciate that we don't, in this country, have treatment on demand for substance use disorder. A lot of people can't get treatment when they want it. And that's a real problem. We really need to have a better, a stronger, deeper, wider treatment program, so that when people are ready, there's a space for them, there's a bed for them. Today, if people don't have insurance in particular, it can be really hard to get any kind of treatment because it's just not in your community, or you have to wait, 3 months on a wait list. I had to wait 10 weeks on a wait list when I went into treatment. I had to call every Monday between 9 and noon for 10 weeks, so my name would keep moving up the wait list. Otherwise, I would have dropped to the bottom again. And I was really proud that I managed to do it, but I also was living in a house, right? I wasn't unhoused or facing some other challenges, but we really need we need more treatment beds, and we need more treatment options for people, so that when they're ready to get going, to start their recovery pathway, we have a place for them. And right now, we just don't have that for a large number of people.
No, and it's becoming an epidemic in itself. for sure. And I can't mention names, but there is a rehab center that I used to do service at that the main dude that runs the place told me it's a $50,000 bill to come for, I think it was just 8 weeks. $50,000. And we wonder how it got so bad.
Right. And the other problem is we don't have good standards for substance treatment. A lot of things that are called treatment at those facilities don't have any evidence supporting them, like equine therapy or there are other things. We don't have the same standards and oversight that we have for other medical conditions. If you're getting treated for diabetes, we know what the acceptable treatments are the doctors are trained, and we don't have the same kind of evidence-based standards and enforcement in substance treatment as we do for other medical conditions.
Right. And, it's got to take a lot more than just a little bit of therapy to get past that point, because it's a lot of self-reflection, I would have to say.
That's right. I mean, the data shows that people really need 12 to 18 months. It doesn't mean, in a facility, but 12 to 18 months of support, of help, of guidance, of whatever form's right for that person. But if they get that focused attention for 12 to 18 months, that's when you're going to have the best odds of success. I sort of created that for myself. I went into rehab. I actually stayed for 5 months, and then I got therapy as soon as I got home. And I had some therapy in rehab, but it's really, it's a process. You're really rewiring your brain, and you're really trying to deal with your emotions. When you get sober, all of a sudden those emotions that you've been shoving down, they start coming back up again. And you often need help how to manage them, how to manage life. People have housing problems. They have work, they have terrible work histories. They need help getting a job. They need just basic communication skills. I had horrible communication skills when I got sober. I was so aggressive. I would jump down your throat. I would be, really mean. I couldn't listen. I mean, there's a lot of things that you need to work on when you get sober. For most of us, there's a lot of work to be done.
A snap back to reality.
Yeah, it's a shock. It's a shock. And it's I remember when I was trying my best, I will tell you an example. So at work, if I really felt under any criticism, I could get really, sort of in attack mode, verbally aggressive. And I remember when I had worked hard and I was better, but I still wasn't great, but I was better. And somebody would react like I wasn't, I could see in their eyes that I had done something that they were upset about. And I'm thinking, but I'm so much better than I used to be. But better and good aren't always the same. It was a process. But even when you have the intention to try to do better, it takes practice, right? It takes practice to learn how to do it. It takes time.
If you don't fail, you don't learn.
That's true. It's true. You don't get to decide and do it perfectly the first time. That's not the way most things work.
Oh no, you can plan and plan and plan, but there's always going to be that wrench that gets thrown into your gears, and it just seizes you up. And those points in your life will define you, because you either A, you get in there, you get that wrench out, or B, you're going to be seized there forever. So taking off your advocacy hat and your judge's robe, let's talk about the hat you put on as a writer. So you have a memoir out that we've spoken a little bit about already, and you've also had publications in some major news papers, correct?
Yeah, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, and others, yeah.
Could you tell us just a little bit about your writing and what you mainly write about?
Yeah, so I will. So on the opinion pieces that I get, like in newspapers and magazines, those are usually recovery related, addiction related, related to multiple pathways, something like that. But I will say with the book, so when I became a judge, it was sort of like a natural time of reflection, and I did actually start thinking, how the heck did I go from shooting meth at 17 to becoming a judge? And so I thought about writing a book, but I actually hadn't read much memoir. And so I started reading recovery memoirs, and I realized a couple things. One is that most of them start in sort of the chaos and crazy stories of the addiction, right? And I really thought I wanted to show where it came from. And so in my memoir, I do go through my childhood and different events to show why it made sense to me to use at that level at that young age. And then at the end of most memoirs, it's sort of like I went to a couple meetings and everything was great. And it's like, well, that's not how recovery works. So 30% of my book is about my first 3 years of recovery, because I really wanted to show sort of how it really can operate, the process of it, how it's incremental, how it's, the different thinking that I was doing, the different analysis and the different areas of life the different challenges and things I was trying to work on. And so I really thought about the structure. But the other thing was that I was a good legal writer. And then when I read memoir, I realized, oh, this is written like a novel. Like, I don't know how to do that. So I was honest with myself that I did not have all the skills I needed. And so I did take writing classes and to learn how to do dialogue and write a good scene. And I will say one of my proudest moments of the book is when the Librarians of America gave me a positive review, and they said it was a harrowing yet ultimately rewarding story. But my favorite part, they said the Librarians of America said it was page turning prose. And I was really proud of that the writing was page turning prose, because I worked hard.
That's amazing. That's got to be a great feeling, from a needle to a gavel to a feather pen, writing a memoir. I mean, that's an amazing story.
Yeah. And, I am a retired judge, which is part of why I can talk. Although my husband says I need to look retired up in the dictionary because I clearly don't understand what it means.
No. You're not, you're technically not retired. You have paying hobbies.
That's right. Well, yeah, sort of. But I have activities, and and I do speak a lot of conferences and events. And I will tell you, I'm training lawyers and judges too. I do continuing legal education training for lawyers and judges on substance use disorder, and I find that really rewarding as well, to sort of educate them about the modern ideas and the modern evidence and where things are. So it is um, it is nice to be able to be of service at this point in my life and to have a retirement that's engaging and productive.
No, that's not retirement. You're not retired. You're a retired judge. You're just not retired from working yet.
Yeah, that's true.
You're still
Yeah.
doing a lot to keep yourself going. So, what do the future endeavors do you have coming down the pipeline?
I mean, I think I'll keep on like this. This year's been crazy. The book came out in January, and I think I've traveled 15 times, some of them for like 3 weeks. And so I'm slowing down a little bit for 24, but I will continue to speak. I'm going to start writing some opinion pieces again. I haven't had time. And I do my board work. The boards I'm on, I actually have to do work for those organizations, and just trying to be of use wherever I can. I mean, that is the goal. I want to have a balanced life, try to make it like a halftime, activity. But the judge title, it can help people listen to me. I really use it as sort of an ear opener. And so I try to make sure I'm sharing information and answering questions that people have and helping them understand, helping friends and family. I talk a lot to friends and family because it helps them to see someone who is a success. But also, for example, the new, what's changed since I've been sober, friends and family, the new technique is called community reinforcement and family training. And I talk about that. It's a more positive reinforcement approach than that tough love approach that doesn't work very well. So it's a mixed bag, a variety of things that I do, but always with the goal of trying to be useful.
Well, that's amazing that you're still out there and you're still pushing. You got my support behind you, and I definitely enjoyed talking to you. I got a couple more questions for you, and we'll start wrapping up. I know it's getting a little late tonight, so out of all the stories that we heard today, what has been the most enlightening moment, would you say, out of this whole journey that you've taken?
I think the big moment for me was realizing that I actually could succeed in sobriety. I mean, when I think about the whole picture, I really thought when I was using that I had three choices. Because of my pain, because of the breadth and depth of the abuse, I thought I could either use drugs, or I could commit suicide, or I would be institutionalized in a mental health ward somewhere. Like, I really thought that's all there was. And the first big enlightening moment for me was realizing that sobriety might actually be on the table for me. That if I did the work, I could actually get out of the misery and have, a productive, happier life. And that was a turning point. I think because recovery is hard, you need to find the hope that you can succeed. It's really was an important part of my process to start to have hope that if the other people could have it, then maybe I could too. That was really an important turning point.
Yeah, and I think, especially your story, it definitely shows that you can take a negative and, make the best of the situation and turn it into the best positive possible. And, you just went to the extreme with it.
As with everything.
So you have a website, junkie2judge.com, is that correct?
Yeah. And like my opinion pieces are there if people want to read them, other information about me. And then my book, From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction, is on Amazon and all the usual sites, and your bookstores can get it if they don't have it. The other thing is people can message me through my website, and I always answer every message. So if there's, I can be of service, or anyone wants to know more about something I said, feel free to reach out to me through my website.
And I'll make sure to put the links down in the description, so go check them out. And, we barely touched the surface on really any subject today. And, I hope to keep in touch with you and bring you on in the future and, have more conversation with you. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. And, I'll let you know when everything pops out, and, if you have anything I can do to help you in any way, just let me know.
Well, I appreciate that. And you as let me know as well. If I can be of any use, feel free to reach out to me again. Always available to you.
I feel like you are doing quite enough. So if you need more, you call me. You need to enjoy your retirement, because you've earned it. So, just give me a couple minutes. We'll chat after we press stop here, and we'll get everything downloaded. And I'll let you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody. That's all the time we have for today. Head over and check out our website, thebceshow.com, where you can subscribe to the email list and contact us. But remember to leave us a rate and review. Helps the podcast with that pesky algorithm. Thanks for listening, y'all.